He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
Well, I was out of the studio last week because I drove 20 plus hours, actually almost 40 hours round trip plus the local driving to go to a broadcast conference in Orlando, Florida. I live in Texas. That's a bit of a hike. But I learned a lot along the way. Had some great conversation with a friend, had a great time to just meditate and think and listen to some good training videos. When you spend that much time in the car, there's a whole lot of opportunity to learn. I also watched some stupid human tricks behind the wheel of a car. Some things that people do when they're not sure what's coming next. And that's what I want to talk about today on Leading Leaders. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I can tell you, there are a whole lot of people out there when they can't see what's coming next that do some of the most ridiculous things you could possibly imagine. As we were driving into Florida, it started to rain as we were on I-10. It didn't stop raining until we pretty much got to Orlando. It was on and off, but there were times that it was monsoon rain. There were times that we saw people in big semis and little cars pulling giant trailers lose control of their car because they didn't realize what a hydroplane would do to you. There were times that we saw people, when the rain would start to fall on their windshield, they would slam on their brakes. I'm like, just turn on your windshield wipers and at least keep rolling, but a dead stop when there's 10,000 cars behind you and traveling at highway speed, you can't do that. But see, that's a leadership lesson too, because I know in my own life there have been those days when it seems a little foggy ahead, a little unclear as to what's the next assignment, what's the next project, what product will you roll out now, what service will you enhance now, how will you serve the people that you serve better than you did last week. You're probably going to have to add a little bit of something to your repertoire. Maybe it's more education, maybe it's more time, maybe it's a better personality that you're going to have to work on yourself. Maybe it's patience. Trust me, you don't ever want to pray for patience because the minute you ask for it, whatever you have gets stretched. That's how patience usually comes. They take what patience you have and they stretch it like Laffy Taffy. That's how you get more patience. So you don't want to pray for that. You don't want to ask for more patience. You want to take your time to build up to that one. But sometimes it's more grace. It's the ability to look at people who are making an annoying difference in your life and thinking, okay, how can I let that go? What can I do to overlook their humanity? What can I do to be a little more kind about their silliness? But sometimes we find ourselves in a place like we did in the pandemic when everybody had to do what we called the pivot. And whatever it is that you're doing right now, it's not going to work. We're going to have to change direction. We're going to have to do something completely different. We might have to launch a new part of our company. Might have to shut down the one we have and create a new one. There were industries born during the pandemic that nobody knew we needed. True story. There were also jobs that have been around for decades, maybe even centuries, that simply evaporated. There were jobs that completely shifted from where they were to what they are now, and they may never go back to what they were before. Policies that changed because we reached a new horizon. Now, if we had, as leaders, decided coming up on the pandemic, that we all just throw on the brakes, we come to a dead stop right where we are, and we don't move until we have new instructions, we'd have all been smashed. Like the cars on the freeway, when the guy at the front of the line had a blowout, pulling a boat 3 times the size of his pickup. Well, he lost control. He changed lanes trying to make it to the highway shoulder and hit a box truck, which lost control. Trying to make its way to the shoulder, it ran over a little car, all the airbags deployed and all the people in the car. Not a good sign. But when we overreact to a problem that's coming or a problem that we can't see, we find ourselves doing that. I was watching a very antiquated video. I don't even know how old it was. I do know the cars in the video were actually older than me. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't from Cuba or Russia or something, because they have really old cars there that apparently still run. We can't do that in America. I don't know why we can't drive old cars in America. Most of them run on gas. They've been banned. But the car in this particular training video was following a hay truck down the highway when the tarp on the back of the hay truck came off of the hay truck, and it fluttered itself open and landed on the windshield of the car behind it. And this video was an instructional video for the driver of the car, and it said, don't slam on your brakes, because you don't know if the person behind you is paying attention or not. Instead, take your foot off the gas. Assume that the line you were following is still going the same direction. Look to your right in your little side mirror and decide if you can get off to the side of the highway, and then pull off as quickly as you can and brake once you're on the shoulder. Not bad advice. I hope you're familiar enough with the terrain to know if you've got a quarter of a mile or half a mile before a bridge or a cliff or a curve or an intersection while you're waiting to get off to the side of the road. But the point is still made. Sudden reactions that you might have in panic to an unseen future, to a moment that you can't predict, to what's coming next. Your overreaction to that could cause a chain reaction that could lead to all kinds of tragedy, a chain reaction that could bring about your own demise or someone behind you. But see, you're not going to know any of that until it's happened. So what do? Well, you got to charge forward. I want you to think, maybe you haven't seen it, but you could probably go back and look at the clips of Days of Thunder. The scene was kind of imitated again in Lightning McQueen in that little kids movie Cars. When there's a crash on the track and everybody on the racetrack is traveling 200 miles an hour plus, and when the crash happens in front of them, their pit crew tells them the same thing. Hold that line. Don't jump up the track to the rail. Don't dive down to the end pit. Hold that line. Stay right where you're at. Stay the course. We know there's smoke ahead of you and you can't see what's on the other side of it. We know there are cars crashed up in that pile and you may or may not hit them. But the chances of survival with the direct impact are much higher than if you're spinning out of control or bouncing off the wall. You're better off to hold that line. And most of those NASCAR drivers have the advantage of having a spotter that is not in the same place they're in. Now, they know the track. They know, am I just coming into turn 1 or just coming out of turn 4? Am I on a straightaway, or have I got 2 more curves to go? I don't know how much space I have before I hit the car that's already crashed in front of me, or how many more cars have crashed in front of me, but I do know the conditions of the track and where the elevations are and where the turns are and where the angles are, where the banks are. And because I know those things, because I've practiced here before, I have a pretty good idea how to react to the circumstances of the track. Now all I need is the actual incident itself. You see, many of us find ourselves in leadership traveling down a road that we've never been down before. We have not traveled this terrain. It's an unfamiliar space. It's an unfamiliar road. We recently moved into a neighborhood. It's an older neighborhood. It's an old country neighborhood. It's out in the county. It's not even in the city. Our streets in our neighborhood, 0 street lights. 0. Some of our neighbors have bright porch lights. Some of the people have put up big vapor lights in their own lawns, their own land, but no street lights. We also have no curbs. There's no way to know that you're at the edge of the road. And because of that, sometimes cars drive too close to the edge of the road as they're passing one another, and the weight of their car will break off the asphalt. And then the rain will come along and wash away the dirt. And so you don't have a grassy slope on either side for a nice little bar ditch. No, you have a rugged edge that can destroy your tires or even parts underneath your car if you get too close to the edge. And you can see the people who are new to the neighborhood and they don't know the road versus those who are very familiar with every curve and every turn and every bump and every hill and every new pothole. They're so familiar with it that they know how to slalom through it, and sometimes they'll come into your lane because they know where the potholes are and they have just enough time to get back. And it's that familiarity with the territory that gives them the ability to confidently move from one side of the road to the other. A leader who's familiar with their territory, they know the sales track that they're on. They know the people that they're going to have to deal with. They know what the process looks like. They've worked through the system many times. I stopped to visit my wife at work the other day, and her boss was navigating through a very particular form with a very particular group of people. And as they were doing the interview, the lady who was supposed to be filling out the form and going through the questions, it was obvious she had never filled out the form before. She had no idea. And so my wife's boss was coaching her. We would go to the bottom of the page, look on this side. Now fill in that box. Yeah, okay. Now from there you can go to this side. It was the territory, the familiarity with the territory. It was knowing the pathway. That's what gave her the greatest advantage. And as a leader, you've got to be very familiar with the territory. You need to know, is this lane going to run out? How much time do you have? Do you need to downshift? Do you need to grab another gear and get after it to get into that lane before it runs out and becomes a dirt road or a bridge or a huge drop-off or an immovable obstacle? See, in our life and leadership, we've got to make the same kind of decisions. We need to know the terrain. We need to know what's coming next. We need to know what relationships we're going to have to navigate. How will your life change in the next election cycle? Don't pretend that it won't. It will. Whatever happens in the next election cycle, local elections, statewide elections, midterm elections, national elections, global elections somewhere else that will have an impact on you, of course they will. And the higher you are in leadership, the more people you lead, the more resources you're responsible for, the more that will be true. If you ran a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company, every election in every country, on every continent, impacts your tax base, your consumer product, the way you deliver your services, the insurances needed, the legislation needed, because they will change. Every one of those things, every election cycle, it's inevitable. But if you don't know that landscape, that's like driving through my neighborhood too fast in the middle of the night because there's no street lights and you're not going to know where the edge of the curve are. And when you think that car's coming straight at you, he's just dodging a pothole, but he knows the road and you don't. If you're leading in a space where you don't know what's coming next, then you're going to be a lot like the NASCAR driver at 200 miles an hour in a windshield full of smoke and you have no idea what's coming next. You better have a spotter. You better be familiar with the territory. If they can tell you, hold that line, I can see what you can't see. That's called a mentor. If they can tell you what you need to do to avoid the collision that's imminently in front of you, that's a good mentor. If they can ask you the questions that will cause you to think again through what you already know, that's a good coach. And if you don't have either one of those in your life, then you better brace for impact. Because chances are you're not familiar with the territory. You're not going to know what to do when a tragedy strikes, whether it's a fire or a tarp or a rainstorm or a snowstorm or just fog on the highway. When you're driving through life as a leader, it is imminent. Election cycles, depressions, chaos in the streets, all of these things are going to impact the way you lead, the way you run your business, the way you run your ministry, whatever it is you're leading. And as they do, your familiarity with the territory, the existence of a coach or a mentor in your life who can ask you the tough questions or tell you what you should be able to see but you can't from where you are, those are the people that are going to help you navigate the unseen and the unexpected. But the number one rule is don't panic. The number two rule is hold the line. You'll make it through this if you can hold the line and not panic. But if you panic, you overreact, chances are you're not just going to bring tragedy on yourself, but on a whole lot of people behind you as well. As a leader, I want to challenge you. when life is unseen ahead of you, when you're unclear on what's next, when it looks like a foggy, smoky, tarp-covered windshield as you're leading through life, hold the line and don't panic. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, or Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.